when I was messing with this rules set so much 2 or 3 years ago, for the weird little horror, horror fantasy setting that I played for a while, I found myself saying, okay, we have to kind of back off on this. We have to say, you don't make a characteristic roll unless it's something that anybody can do and anybody can fail for arbitrary reasons. It doesn't make any sense otherwise. It can't have anything to do with how big the rock is.
Right. Yes.
And so all of a sudden, the whole point of a characteristic roll starts becoming very iffy. Why not go D&D 4E with it and just say, okay, it's a saving roll, and for every fucking person out there, it's a 55% chance, 10 or higher, and you're done. That's a saving roll in 4th edition. There's no differences in saving those. So they're all the same. Because a saving throw is made when, could be anything. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do about that phenomenon. Nothing. Roll. I don't care what level you are. And so...
and I mean, I think you get the book and look at the examples, but they have that feel. Something like resisting fatigue, right? You could have a really strong guy who on this hike, there might, maybe the weather is getting to him, maybe it's his mood, like, he could get fatigued and fail his con times 5 roll. Someone else could succeed on it,
even though they've got a crap con.
Right.
So the difference between the high con guy and the low con guy isn't about their performance in the moment. It's about their performance on the average across multiple instances. That's the only way you're going to see a difference in percent is across multiple. I mean, you try, if they only ever make that roll one time, then their quality is the fact that I've got this value, you've got that value. It existed as a probability, but it has no fictional weight. Right. So, it's very difficult. Yes, statistically, on that single roll, you've got a 75% chance and he's got a 30% chance. I don't argue with that for a second. But once the dice hit the table, if this is the only time that the two of them ever compare their performance in this exact variable, then there's something extremely unsatisfying about the dice coming up wrong. We have to make excuses for the rest of our lives as to why that happened. And that's what all those things you were describing. Those aren't explanations. Those are excuses.
Right.
So it's sort of going all the way back to the original and saying, guys, there's a conceptual issue here. There is a conceptual issue. So you wanted some way for somebody to demonstrate their high strength by being able to pick stuff up or push things aside. You wanted a 17 to be a little better than a 16 and both of them to be way better than a 10. I get all that. And it struck you that rolling percent would do it because, frankly, everybody at Chaosium was obsessed with rolling percents on everything. So that must be it. And that's where you get the baseline, the raw skill roll, too. And yet all of their wargaming background and their SCA background and everything said, no, it's always comparison. And that's where you get your opposed rolls and your combat, combat outcomes that are I'm not sure if you would call them clean. What they are is clear. Right? That lower line in the diagram, whatever else you may want to say about it, you're going to get exciting combat and you're going to know what's happening. Right?
Absolutely.
So and then the same thing with the opposed skill, with the Hero Wars thing, it lends itself better to a situational explanation, in my opinion.
Right.
So the raw skill check and the raw characteristic check, to me, they just seem like they belong in a different game. They always have for RuneQuest. When I was, just sort of hacking away at it as we played, because I wasn't invested in, being a purist, playing in my own system and just playing at this table and enjoying my own setting, and just enjoying myself and saying, oh, well, geez, look at that. That's not helping us at all. Maybe I'm missing it. Maybe I'm dumb, whatever, but we're just not going to use that way. But I was looking at it and saying, why not just make it a resistance check like you do with poison? Poison has a strength value or a con value, right? And they call it potency. It's rated like a characteristic, and so it's like power. You just match potency versus constitution, and roll. It's just like power versus power for a spell. Why not do that for anything involved with your characteristics? Just assign how strong the freaking door is, or assign how strong the wind gust is, and roll on the resistance table. There you go. Right? It's completely coherent. So anyway, that's sort of my take on how that's been running. I don't know if there was anything else is that getting us anywhere, or just repeating things or?
No, this is great. I think I hadn't identified how kind of incongruous the characteristic rule was, and I really love that idea of moving toward the resistance table, particularly because the game is I think a little bit like
you don't do any violence to the game at all by doing that. The mechanic's sitting right there, right?
And the game is like so much about quantifying things, and I would love to build a map where this kind of terrain, you're gonna have to roll this on the resistance table or risk fatigue.
If you go back to my essay about Glorantha, role playing in Glorantha, why Glorantha, right? If you go look at that, and I try to present the coarsest possible comparison of the Hero Wars trajectory and the RuneQuest trajectory. And what it ultimately came to was that the first one focuses on representing effectiveness. So you could have a big score of 5 mastery, which is effectively 25, and this other guy has a big score of 20, so 5 less than you, but it doesn't actually mean that you're taller than he is or heavier. It means that when push comes to shove, literally, you're more likely to knock him over. That's what it means, and that's all it means. Now, you try to say that, go back to 2000 when Hero Wars was published. You try to say that to the RuneQuest fan base.
Right.
What the fuck are you talking about? They were like, it was literally like, it's sand in their eyes. They could not grasp it. And to that fan base, the 75% is a big fucking deal. It's a real thing in there. Just like an axe does this much damage. And it might do more if you have a strength modifier, but an axe, it is an axe. And if you hand it to this guy, and now he has it, it's going to do the same damage because this axe is represented in the fiction by that damage roll. Period. It is what it is. Whereas in the Hero Wars way, it's like, well, I don't know, who's holding it? Right? Who's holding it? It's going to do as much damage as that guy can do with it because he's that guy. And it's because of that lack of that representation is so critical to that branch of fandom. Everything has to be quantified, and then we find algorithms for the way that they impact one another. And so does that make any sense? I mean, I'm kind of...
No, it absolutely does. It's making me think about how... So parts of RQG it feels like it's being pulled in those two directions, right? So there's definitely some aspects, and they're my favorite aspects, that are Kalashnikov design. For instance, like augments and any kind of environmental advantages. They are plus or minus 20% or more.
And that is what it is. Right. It is what it is. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, there's no, there's no thing where you're like, maybe this is -5%. There's nothing dinky. Either you have it or you don't. And the same thing goes, it's dark and everyone's at -40%, or it's not, and you
Right,
can see fine.
right,
There's no
right.
half light.
Mhm.
But then you have something like the characteristic roll where you can go ×1, ×2, ×3,
Right, and then you're kind of
×4,
wondering, what is
×5.
that? Does that mean like the size of the rock? But then what happens if I roll bad? I mean, what is that? So I agree.
And
It's
of course,
yeah,
in the few times I've done it, it's ×3 or ×5. I don't,
right.
cut out half of it,